In a galaxy where faith replaced truth, where trillions lived and died without ever seeing the sun, where the very concept of hope had been ground into dust beneath the weight of 10,000 years of endless war, something impossible happened. It laughed. The sound came first, not through Vox systems or astropathic relay. It simply existed, echoing through the smog-choked air of Hive Carador like a glitch in reality itself. Workers in the lower manufactorums stopped their endless toil, looking up at the corroded pipes and flickering lumen strips, as if the machinery itself had developed a sense of humor. Gunsurf Mara Vosk was 37 floors above the refinery deck when she heard it. A sound so alien to this world that her mind struggled to classify it. Not a scream, not the grinding of gears or the hiss of steam. Something organic, human, almost, but wrong in a way that made her hand instinctively reach for the stub pistol at her hip. "Did you hear that?" she asked her partner, Corporal Drevin, a man whose face had been weathered by 20 years of breathing toxic air. Drevin's augmetic eye whirred as it adjusted focus, scanning the industrial maze around them. "Hear what?" Before Mara could answer, the sky tore open, not with the familiar crimson wound of a warp breach, not with the screaming chaos of a demonic incursion. The tear was red, yes, but it was clean, surgical, as if someone had taken a knife to the fabric of reality and simply cut a doorway where none should exist. Through that impossible wound fell a shape, tumbling, flailing, and still laughing. "Oh, this is just perfect." The voice carried across the entire hive despite the distance, cutting through the industrial din with impossible clarity. "Portal opens mid-sentence, throws me into space hell, and I didn't even get to finish my joke." The shape hit a transit rail, bounced, struck a loading platform with enough force to buckle reinforced steel, bounced again, and crashed through the stained glass window of the Cathedral of the Emperor's Eternal Vigil, leaving a hole that looked suspiciously like a spread-eagled human figure. Mara and Drevin stood frozen on their observation platform, weapons forgotten, minds unable to process what they had just witnessed. "Throne, preserve us," Drevin whispered. "What was that?" Inside the cathedral, 3,000 imperial citizens had gathered for evening prayer. They knelt in perfect rows before the towering statue of the god emperor, their voices raised in the litany of devotion that had been recited without variation for 6 millennia. The priests stood at the altar, their augmetic voices amplified by ancient Vox equipment, leading the masses in their endless supplication. The figure that had crashed through the window landed in the baptismal font with a splash that sent blessed water arcing across the assembled faithful. There was a moment of perfect silence, the kind of silence that exists in the heartbeat between lightning and thunder. Then the figure sat up. "Okay, so quick question," it said, water dripping from what appeared to be a red and black mask. "Does anyone know where I can get a chimichanga? Because I've been falling through dimensions for what feels like hours and I am starving." The figure stood, climbed out of the font, wrung water from its costume with exaggerated care. It was humanoid, male, probably, wearing tactical gear that looked designed by someone who thought camouflage was a personal insult. Red dominated the ensemble, with black accents that seemed to shift and flow like living shadow. Twin katanas were strapped to its back. An assortment of weapons and pouches covered its belt. And the mask, that strange red mask with black patches around the eyes, somehow conveyed expression despite being completely immobile. Father Grael, the cathedral's high priest, stepped forward. He was old, face scored with devotional scarring, robes heavy with the weight of 70 years of service. His hand trembled as he raised his last pistol, the same weapon that had put down 3 heretics and a corrupted servitor over the decades. "You dare!" Grael's voice shook with religious fury. "Defile this sacred place. You dare interrupt the Emperor's prayer?" The masked figure tilted its head, the gesture somehow conveying genuine confusion. "Okay, first of all, I didn't dare anything. I fell. There's a difference. Falling is involuntary. Daring is like a choice. I make bad choices all the time. But this wasn't one of them. It paused, looking around the cathedral. Also, is that guy your god? It pointed at the Emperor's statue. Because I gotta tell you, the whole corpse on a throne aesthetic is very Tim Burton, but it's not exactly inspiring confidence. The assembled faithful gasped. Some began to pray louder, as if their devotion could erase the blasphemy they had just heard. Others reached for concealed weapons, hands shaking with religious rage. "You will be silent," Grail commanded, his last pistol steady now, aimed at the heretic's chest. "In the name of the God Emperor, I." Yeah, God Emperor, sacred ground, blah blah blah. The figure waved dismissively. "Look, I've done this song and dance before. You point the gun, I make a joke. You shoot me, I die. I come back. You freak out, rinse, and repeat. So let's just skip to the part where you realize I'm literally unkillable and we can talk about where to get food in this very depressing metal city." Grail pulled the trigger. The Les bolt struck center mass. The superheated beam burned through the red fabric, through the flesh beneath, cauterizing a hole the size of a fist directly through the figure's chest, through the heart, through organs that should have been essential for life. The figure looked down at the hole, then at Grail, then back at the hole. "Wow. Okay. That is super rude. I literally just asked about food and you shoot me in the feelings? I mean, I don't actually have feelings there anymore. Pretty sure my heart's been replaced by spite and bad decisions, but still. Rude. Rude." It collapsed. The body hit the cathedral floor with a wet thump. Blood pooled around it, spreading across ancient stone that had been blessed by saints long dead. The congregation exhaled. Crisis averted. The Emperor protects. Prayers of cleansing would be said. The body would be burned. Life would continue as it always had. 30 seconds passed. Long enough for Father Grail to lower his weapon. Long enough for some of the faithful to approach the body, curiosity overcoming their fear. The corpse sat up. "Psych. Bet you thought that was permanent, didn't you? Classic misdirection. I learned that from a guy named Mysterio. Or maybe Loki. One of those theatrical villain types. They all blur together after a while." The hole in its chest was closing, flesh knitting together with wet, obscene sounds that echoed through the cathedral like a perverse hymn. Bone reformed. Organs regrew. The fabric of the costume somehow repaired itself, the fibers weaving back together as if time itself was reversing. Within 60 seconds, there was no wound, no blood, nothing to indicate the fatal injury had ever existed except the spreading pool of red on the floor. The figure stood, stretched, cracked its neck. "So, about those chimichangas?" 3,000 voices screamed at once. The sound was primal, beyond religion, beyond faith. It was the sound of every certainty being ripped away, the sound of reality breaking. The masses fled, crushing each other in their panic to reach the exits, trampling the weak, the elderly, the young. Survival instinct overriding 10,000 years of conditioning in a single moment of pure terror. Father Grail remained. His mind had fractured, unable to reconcile what he had witnessed with everything he had been taught. The last pistol fell from his nerveless fingers. His lips moved, but no sound emerged. Just the desperate repetition of prayers that suddenly felt hollow. "Hey, you okay there, Pops?" The figure approached, its tone genuinely concerned. "You're doing that thing where your brain is trying to divide by zero. I've seen it before. Usually right before someone's head explodes. Metaphorically. Sometimes literally. This one time with a psychic, actually. You probably don't want to hear that story." Grail's eyes focused on the figure, on the mask that somehow smiled despite being rigid, on the weapons that hung so casually from its body, on the impossible vitality that radiated from something that should be dead. "What?" Grail whispered, his voice breaking. "Are you? Oh, now you want to talk? After shooting me? I'm Deadpool, the merc with a mouth, the regenerating degenerate. The okay, I have like 50 nicknames, and will be here all day if I list them. Point is, I'm new here. I'm confused. And I Really need to know what kind of dystopian nightmare realm I've landed in. Because I've been to a lot of dystopian nightmare realms, and this one is giving me serious everyone is miserable forever vibes. Behind them, the cathedral's upper structure began to collapse. The impact of Deadpool's entry had weakened support beams that had stood for millennia. Stone and metal groaned. Dust cascaded from the vaulted ceiling. Also, Deadpool added, looking up, we should probably not stand here. Building's coming down. It's a whole thing. He grabbed Father Grail by the robes and dragged him toward the exit as the cathedral's roof gave way. The ancient structure collapsed inward, crushing the altar, the statue, everything. A pillar of dust and debris exploded outward, consuming the surrounding streets. When the dust settled, Deadpool stood at the edge of the destruction, still holding the semi-conscious priest. So, he said conversationally, on a scale of 1 to apocalyptic, how much trouble am I in? His answer came in the form of sirens. Deep, mechanical, the kind of sound that hadn't been heard in Hive Corridor for decades. Emergency klaxons that made the very air vibrate with their warning. Oh good, Deadpool said. The space cops are coming. I love space cops. They're always so understanding and willing to listen to reasonable explanations. Across the Hive, in the command spire that overlooked the sprawling industrial nightmare, Planetary Governor Cassius watched the picked feeds with hands that had begun to shake. Advisors shouted. Commanders demanded orders. The cathedral, one of the oldest structures on the planet, had been destroyed. An unknown entity had survived a killing blow and caused mass panic. But it was the reports from the Mechanicus that made Cassius truly afraid. Governor, Magos Kelvin's augmented voice crackled through the Vox. The servitors in that sector are malfunctioning. Their Vox systems are broadcasting. The content is unusual. Define unusual, Magos. A pause. Then, reluctantly, they're telling jokes, Governor. Bad ones. The cathedral's auto systems have been compromised. The hymnal programming has been replaced with something called stand-up comedy. We don't know how. We don't know why. But it's spreading. Cassius felt ice in his veins. Contact the Inquisition, now. Tell them we have a situation that defies classification. And may the Emperor have mercy on us all. In the ruins of the cathedral, Deadpool sneezed. Did someone just talk about me? That always happens when people talk about me. It's like a sixth sense, or seventh. I've lost count of my senses. He looked at Father Grail, who had finally passed out from shock. You're not going to be much help, are you? Okay, new plan. I wander around, cause chaos, unintentional chaos, which is the best kind, and wait for someone important to show up so I can ask them what the hell is going on. He started walking, leaving footprints in the dust. Behind him, the cathedral smoldered. Above him, the red tear in the sky slowly closed, reality sealing itself like healing flesh. But the damage was done. Something impossible had arrived. Something that laughed when it should scream. Something that refused to die when death was certain. And in the warp, in that terrible space between reality and madness, 4 ancient powers stirred. They felt the disturbance, the wrongness, the presence of something that existed outside their usual games. Korn sensed endless violence without rage. Tsiench perceived chaos without purpose. Nurgle recognized life without meaning. And Slanesh felt pleasure without consequence. They watched. They waited. They wondered what this new piece on the board would do. On Hive Corridor, Deadpool found a food vendor. The man sold ration bars that looked like compressed suffering. I'll take 10, Deadpool said. And can you tell me where I am? Because this place is giving me serious, everyone wants to die but can't afford it vibes. The vendor stared, his mind unable to process the masked figure covered in cathedral dust. Also, Deadpool added, you guys ever heard of chimichangas? No? Okay. Follow-up question. How screwed am I? The sirens grew louder. Searchlights began sweeping the Hive. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of heavy boots marching in perfect unison. Deadpool sighed. That sounds like my cue. Sorry about this. He vanished into the industrial maze, leaving behind only questions and the faint echo of laughter that shouldn't exist. And that night, something impossible had arrived in the Imperium of Man. Something that would change everything. Or at least make it significantly more annoying. The Inquisition had existed for 10,000 years. In that time, it had catalogued every form of heresy, mutation, and corruption known to mankind. Daemon princes who spoke in tongues of madness. Xenos infiltrators who could mimic human form perfectly. Warp entities that defied the laws of physics and sanity. But in all those millennia of hunting threats to the Imperium, they had never encountered anything quite like this. Inquisitor Severine Kalt stood in the observation chamber of the planetary conclave. Her augmetic eye-processing data streams faster than human thought. She was 47 standard years old, though her face showed less age thanks to Juvenat treatments. Her black coat bore the seal of the Ordo Hereticus, and her expression carried the weight of someone who had seen the worst humanity could offer and decided it wasn't quite worst enough. "Play it again," she commanded. The holo display flickered, showing grainy picked feed from the cathedral, the figure in red and black, sitting up after being shot through the heart, the impossible regeneration, the casual dismissal of death itself. Beside her, Magos Lyriax of the Adeptus Mechanicus tilted his hooded head, mechadendrites writhing with calculated precision. His vocal synthesizer produced a flat, emotionless tone that somehow conveyed curiosity. The entity's biological processes defy classification. Cellular regeneration occurs at a rate that suggests either Xenos origin or warp contamination. Yet scans show human baseline DNA. Augmented, certainly, but fundamentally human. This should not be possible. "Many things should not be possible, Magos," Severine replied, her voice cold. "Yet here we stand, watching them happen regardless." She zoomed in on the figure's face. The mask that somehow conveyed expression, the casual body language that suggested either supreme confidence or complete ignorance of danger. "What troubles you about this creature, Inquisitor?" asked Lord Commander Thrace, a veteran officer whose decorations spoke of 60 years of military service. "It appears to be a single entity, contained. We mobilize the Tempestus Scions, corner it, and subject it to enough firepower to level a building. Problem solved." Severine turned to face him, her augmetic eye glowing faintly in the dim light. "What troubles me, Commander, is that this entity walked through a cathedral full of the faithful, committed blatant heresy, was executed for that heresy, and then stood up and asked about food. It shows no fear, no understanding of the Imperium, no recognition of the God Emperor's authority. That suggests either profound ignorance or profound arrogance. Both are dangerous." "More than that," Magos Lyriax interjected. "The servitors in the affected sector have been compromised. Their programming has been altered without physical access to their neural ports. The cathedral's automated systems now broadcast nonsensical audio files. Laughter, jokes, concepts that serve no logical purpose. The method of infection is unknown. The purpose is unknown. This entity's presence creates technological anomalies that defy the Omnissiah's laws." Severine felt a cold sensation in her augmented spine. Technology that corrupted through proximity. She had seen that before, in the rusted horrors that served the plague god. But those infections brought decay, entropy, the slow dissolution of all systems into rot and ruin. This was different. This was chaos without corruption, disorder without decay. "Where is it now?" she asked. "Lost," admitted Commander Thrace, clearly uncomfortable with the admission. "It entered the lower manufactorums 3 hours ago. Since then, every attempt to track it has failed. Security picked feeds malfunction when aimed in its direction. Auspex scanners return contradictory data. Witnesses report seeing it in multiple locations simultaneously. We have 17 separate reports of the entity, all from different sectors of the hive, all at the same time." 17? Severine's human eye narrowed. "You're telling me there are 17 of these creatures?" "No. Magos Lyriax's mechadendrites clicked together in what might have been the machine equivalent of frustration. Analysis suggests a single entity moving at speeds beyond normal human capability. Or the witnesses are experiencing shared delusion. Or the entity possesses the ability to manipulate perception. All theories are equally probable, given the available data. Severine made her decision. Lock down the lower hive. Nothing enters or leaves without my authorization. Deploy the Tempestus Scions in squad formations. I want overlapping fields of fire covering every major thoroughfare, and get me a psyker. I need to know if this thing is warp-touched. Inquisitor, Thrace began, concern evident in his voice. Locking down the lower hive will affect 3 million workers. Production quotas will not be met. The Administratum will— The Administratum, Severine interrupted, her voice sharp as a power sword. Will do as they're told. This is now an inquisitorial matter. I am invoking my authority under the Codex Hereticus. All planetary resources are at my disposal until this threat is neutralized. Am I understood? Thrace straightened, decades of military discipline overriding his concerns. Understood, Inquisitor. I will give the orders immediately. As he left, Severine turned back to the holo display. The figure stood frozen mid-gesture, one hand raised as if waving, the other resting casually on a weapon. Everything about its posture screamed irreverence, mockery, a complete disregard for the gravity of its situation. What are you? She whispered to the image. Daemon? Xenos? Or something worse? The answer came sooner than expected. In the lower manufactorums, Deadpool had discovered several things about his new environment. First, the people here were universally miserable. Not the fun kind of miserable where you complain, but secretly enjoy it. The real kind, where hope had died so long ago that most didn't remember what it felt like. Second, the air tasted like industrial waste mixed with despair. Third, nobody had heard of chimichangas, which was arguably the greatest tragedy of all. He sat on a gantry overlooking an assembly line, where workers fitted components onto what looked like weapons. Big ones, the kind designed to make other big things stop being big things. The workers moved with mechanical precision, their faces blank, their eyes dead. Some had been augmented with crude bionics that clicked and whirred as they worked. Nobody spoke, nobody looked up. They just worked. Endless and eternal. This is depressing, Deadpool announced to no one in particular. Like, seriously depressing. I've been to a lot of dystopias, it's kind of my thing, actually, but this one takes the cake. The sad, gray, probably poisonous cake. One worker glanced up. A woman, maybe 30, though it was hard to tell through the grime and exhaustion. Her name was Yara. She had been working this line for 14 years. She would work it until she died, which would probably be soon given the toxin exposure. You should not be here, she said, her voice hollow. The overseers will come. They will punish us for the disruption. Overseers? Deadpool tilted his head. Oh, you mean middle management? Yeah, they're the worst in every universe. But here's the thing. He dropped down from the gantry, landing with a theatrical flourish that absolutely no one appreciated. I'm kind of hard to punish. Trust me, people have tried. The results are usually hilarious for me, and traumatizing for them. Yara stared at his mask, at the weapons, at the casual confidence that seemed alien in this place. Are you a ganger? A criminal? I'm whatever the plot needs me to be, honestly. But right now I'm just a confused merc, trying to figure out where the hell I am and how to get home. Or at least find a decent taco. I'm flexible. The workers had stopped now, watching this exchange. Productivity had dropped to 0. Somewhere in the facility, alarms would be triggering. Overseers would be dispatched. But for this moment, they just watched, fascinated by something that didn't follow the rules they had lived under their entire lives. This place, Deadpool continued, gesturing broadly, is Warhammer 40,000, right? Grimdark future. Everyone's miserable. Big guy on a golden throne. Tuesday for most people. Please tell me I'm right, because if I fell into something even worse, I'm going to be very upset. The Emperor protects, Yara replied automatically, the phrase programmed into her since birth. Yeah, I heard about him. Big E, the Corpse King. Really committed to that sitting very still aesthetic. But here's what I don't get. Deadpool leaned against the assembly line, completely ignoring the deadly machinery. If he's so great, why does everyone here look like they're one bad day from ending it all? And trust me, I'm an expert on bad days. I've had like 6,000 of them, consecutively. Before Yara could answer, the facility's vox casters crackled to life. The voice that emerged was authoritative, amplified, and very, very angry. Attention. An unauthorized entity has been detected in Manufactorum 77 Beta. All workers are to cease operations and evacuate immediately. Failure to comply will result in summary execution. This is not a drill. Wow, Deadpool said. They went straight to summary execution. No warnings, no second chances. Just boom, you're dead. This place really commits to the totalitarian nightmare vibe. The workers began to move, filing toward exits with the same mechanical precision they brought to their labor. Yara hesitated, looking at the masked figure who seemed utterly unconcerned. You should run, she said. When they say execution, they mean it. Oh, I'm sure they do. But see, here's the thing about me. Deadpool spread his arms wide. I'm really hard to execute. Like, you wouldn't believe how many people have tried. There was this one time Apocalypse threw me into the sun. The sun. And guess what? Still here. Little crispy for a few hours. But I got better. The facility's main doors exploded inward. Not opened. Exploded. Charges had been set to breach them, and now armed soldiers poured through the smoke. They wore black carapace armor and carried hell guns that hummed with lethal energy. Tempestus Scions, the Imperium's elite special forces. Each one a hardened killer trained from birth for exactly this kind of operation. They moved in perfect formation, covering angles, setting up overlapping fields of fire. Within seconds, the entire Manufactorum floor was locked down, exits covered, escape routes blocked, and at the center of their tactical formation, a single masked figure in red and black who was examining his fingernails. That was pretty good, Deadpool called out. The door explosion was a bit much, very Michael Bay, but the formation is solid. You guys do this a lot? Tempester Prime Kalen advanced, his helmet's vox amplifying his voice. Entity designated Crimson Zero. You are hereby detained by order of the Holy Inquisition. Compliance will be rewarded. Resistance will be met with lethal force. Crimson Zero? Is that my designation? Because I gotta tell you, I already have a name. It's Deadpool. Deadpool. Like a pool that's dead, or a place where dead people swim. The metaphor's a work in progress. Kalen made a gesture. 20 hellguns aimed at Deadpool from 20 different angles. The energy weapons charged with a distinctive whine that suggested they were very good at their job. Final warning, Kalen stated. Compliance or termination. Deadpool sighed. You know, I was really hoping we could skip this part, but nobody ever listens to me. Okay, here's how this goes. You shoot me. I die for like 30 seconds. I come back. You freak out. I say something witty. We do this whole dance 3 or 4 more times until you realize I literally cannot be killed. And then we have a conversation like adults. Or we could skip to the conversation part now and save everyone some trauma. Your choice. Kalen didn't hesitate. Fire. 20 hellguns discharged simultaneously. The last beams, superheated and focused, converged on Deadpool's position. The energy was enough to vaporize ceramite armor. The heat was enough to ignite promethium. When the barrage stopped, nothing remained but a charred silhouette on the floor and some rapidly dissipating smoke. Target neutralized, one scion reported. Kalen nodded, already moving to secure the perimeter. Another successful operation. Another threat eliminated. Just another day serving the Emperor. Then the silhouette moved. It sat up. Stood. The charred flesh began to regenerate, new skin growing over burned tissue. The costume reformed, fibers knitting together through some process that defied understanding. Within 30 seconds, Deadpool stood exactly as he had before, completely unmarked. "Okay," he said cheerfully. "Now we're at the part where you freak out." To their credit, the Tempestus Scions didn't break formation. Years of training, combat conditioning, and faith in the Emperor kept them steady. But Kalen could see the slight tremor in some weapons, the subtle shift in stance that suggested psychological stress. "What are you?" Kalen demanded, his voice tight. "I'm the guy you can't kill. Also the guy who's getting really tired of being shot. Seriously, this is like the third time today, and it's starting to hurt my feelings." "Well, not my feelings, exactly, those died years ago, but you get the idea." Kalen made another gesture. This time, the Scions opened fire continuously, lost beams creating a sustained barrage that turned the air itself into a shimmering heat haze. They poured enough firepower into Deadpool's position to level a hab block. Deadpool stood in the center of it, arms crossed, foot tapping impatiently. When they finally stopped, their weapons overheating, he was still there, still standing, still completely fine. "You done?" he asked. "Because I have questions and you're the only people who seem even remotely official. Like, where am I exactly? What's the deal with the skull motif everywhere? Is that a theme, or just aggressive interior decorating? And most importantly," he pointed at Kalen, "where can I get food that doesn't look like it was made from recycled sadness?" In the observation chamber, Severine watched the picked feed with growing unease. She had seen her Scions engage the entity, seen them pour enough firepower to kill a small army into a single target, seen it survive without apparent effort. "Magos," she said quietly. "Analysis. The entity demonstrates regenerative capabilities beyond known biological limits. Lost weapons create thermal damage that should be irreversible. Yet the entity's cellular structure repairs itself within seconds. Hypothesis. Either the entity possesses technology we cannot detect, or it operates under physical laws different from our own." "Warp-touched?" Severine asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. No warp signature detected, no psychic emanations, no reality distortion characteristic of demonic presence. It is as if the entity simply chooses not to die, and reality accommodates this choice. Severine felt something she rarely experienced: uncertainty. In her decades of service, she had developed instincts about threats, how to classify them, how to eliminate them. But this thing defied all her categories. It wasn't a daemon, no warp taint. It wasn't Xenos, human DNA confirmed. It wasn't a psyker, no psychic signature. It was simply impossible. And the Imperium had very specific procedures for dealing with the impossible. "Commander Thrace," she voxed. "Prepare the chambers. I'm bringing it in for interrogation. Inquisitor, are you certain? If the entity is as dangerous as—" "It's not dangerous," Severine interrupted. "That's what concerns me. It should be dangerous. It should be threatening. Instead, it's asking about food. Something is very, very wrong here." On the Manufactorum floor, Deadpool had somehow convinced the Tempestus Scions to lower their weapons by the simple expedient of refusing to die no matter how many times they killed him. Now he sat on a storage crate, swinging his legs like a child, while Kalen tried to report the situation to his superiors. "So," Deadpool said to the nearest Scion, "what's your name? You guys have names or just designations? Because if it's just numbers, that's really dehumanizing. I mean, I know we're in a fascist hellscape and that's kind of the point, but still, common courtesy costs nothing." "What?" The Scion didn't respond. His training forbade casual conversation with potential threats. But behind his helmet, his mind raced. He had been trained to handle every threat the Imperium might face. But nothing in that training covered an enemy who treated combat like an inconvenient interruption to conversation. "Not chatty, huh? That's cool. I can talk enough for both of us. So here's what I'm thinking you guys take me to, whoever's in charge. I explain that I'm just passing through and mean no harm. We establish that I'm unkillable, and therefore not worth fighting, and then maybe someone can explain to me how to get home, or at least to somewhere with better food. This place has a serious lack of variety. Like, I've seen prison cafeterias with more options. Kalen finished his report and turned to face Deadpool. You are to come with us. The Inquisitor wishes to speak with you. Finally, someone important. Lead the way, my armored friends. I promise to be on my best behavior, which, fair warning, is still pretty bad. But I'll try. As the scions formed up around him, creating a mobile containment formation, Deadpool looked around the manufactorum one last time. The workers had returned to their stations, already back to their endless labor, as if nothing had happened, as if the impossible had become just another day in the Imperium. Hey, Deadpool called out to Yara, who had stopped near her station. Hang in there, okay? Things are gonna get weird, but weird is better than boring. Trust me on this. Yara didn't respond. Couldn't respond. Speaking to the detained was forbidden, but something in her dead eyes flickered, just for a moment. The smallest spark of something that might have been hope, or might have been the beginning of heresy. As Deadpool was escorted out of the manufactorum, reality itself seemed to hold its breath. The Imperium had endured 10,000 years through absolute certainty, absolute faith, absolute intolerance for anything that challenged the established order. And now something had arrived that couldn't be killed, couldn't be intimidated, and refused to take anything seriously. The galaxy was about to get very, very loud. And somewhere in the warp, the Chaos Gods leaned forward on their impossible thrones, fascinated by this new development. Because if there was one thing they understood, it was chaos, and Deadpool was about to bring them more than they had seen in millennia. The interrogation chamber was designed to break minds. 50 meters beneath the planetary conclave, carved from solid rockcrete and lined with psi-dampening alloys, it had seen thousands of heretics confess their sins. Some through persuasion, most through pain. The walls were stained with the evidence of decades of service to the Imperium's truth. Deadpool sat in the center of the room, manacled to a chair that had been bolted directly into the floor. The chains were blessed ceramite, inscribed with prayers that were supposed to bind even daemons. His weapons had been removed, catalogued, and locked in a separate vault after 3 tech priests had argued for an hour about how the ammunition worked. He was humming, badly. Some tune that didn't exist in this universe, off-key and somehow still cheerful. Inquisitor Severine Kalt entered the chamber, flanked by 2 gun servitors, their weapons tracking Deadpool's every movement with mechanical precision. She carried a data slate and her own augmented mind, both filled with questions that needed answers. Entity, she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been denied information. You will answer my questions. Completely. Honestly. Any deception will be detected and punished. Deadpool stopped humming. Okay, first question, do you guys have a name for this aesthetic? Because I'm calling it Torture Dungeon Chic, and I feel like that's selling it short. There's definitely a theme going on with all the skulls and chains. Very committed. I respect that. Severine's augmetic eye whirred as it focused on Deadpool's masked face, analyzing micro-expressions despite the barrier. Your name, your origin, your purpose on this world. Begin. Well, since you asked so nicely. Deadpool shifted in his chains, somehow making the restraints look comfortable. I'm Deadpool. Wade Wilson, if we're being formal. But we're not, so Deadpool's fine. Origin story is complicated. Involves cancer, illegal experimentation, and a radioactive blood transfusion from Wolverine. Or maybe that was a fever dream. Memories fuzzy on the details. Wolverine? Severine made a note on her data slate. Xenos designation? What? No. He's a short, angry Canadian with knives in his hands. Totally human. Well, mutant human. There's a distinction, but it's boring. Point is, I'm from Earth. Regular Earth. The one with tacos and Netflix and people who don't live in nightmare cities made of skulls. Severine felt a cold calculation forming in her mind. The entity spoke of another world, not another planet in the Imperium, but another reality entirely. She had read reports of such things, buried deep in inquisitorial archives, warnings about beings that slipped between dimensions, bringing contamination with them. "You claim to be from another dimension," she stated, watching for any reaction. "I don't claim, I state. There's a difference. Claims can be disputed. Statements are just facts. And the fact is, I was minding my own business, fighting ninjas. Long story. Don't ask. When a purple portal opened up and sucked me through. Next thing I know, I'm falling through your red sky into your depressing city where everyone wants to die but can't afford the copay." "Purple portal," Severine repeated, making another note. "Warp manifestation? I don't know what that means. But if it's the hell space between dimensions where the laws of physics go to die, then maybe? All I know is 1 second I'm in New York, next second I'm here getting shot by an angry priest. Which, for the record, is not the weirdest Tuesday I've had, but it's top 10. Magos Lyriax entered the chamber, his mechadendrites carrying various scanning equipment. He approached Deadpool without fear, his curiosity overriding any sense of danger. "Entity," the Magos intoned, "you will submit to biological and technological analysis. Resistance is futile, and will be noted in your file." "Ooh, I have a file already? I'm flattered. Do I get a copy? Because I'd love to see what you guys wrote about me. I bet it's all dangerously handsome, and refuses to die despite our best efforts, and makes us question our life choices." Lyriax extended a scanning probe toward Deadpool's chest, where the lost bolt had struck him hours earlier. The equipment hummed, taking readings that made the Magos' optical units dilate in what might have been mechanical surprise. "Cellular regeneration is active at a rate of O." He paused, recalculated, paused again. "This is impossible. The entity's cells are dividing and repairing damage that doesn't exist, as if the body is constantly in a state of healing despite having no wounds." "Yeah, that's my healing factor. It's always on. Like a really aggressive insurance policy that won't let me cancel the subscription. I've tried. Trust me, I've tried." Severine leaned forward slightly. "You speak of trying to die. Why would something with your capabilities wish for death?" For the first time since entering this universe, Deadpool's tone shifted, just slightly. The humor dimmed, replaced by something older and more tired. "You ever live so long that you forget what it feels like to be alive? Ever watch everyone around you age and die while you just keep going? Ever realize that nothing you do matters because you'll always heal, always come back, always be stuck in the same loop forever?" He paused. "No, of course you haven't. You probably die at like 40 in this nightmare realm. Lucky you." Severine exchanged a glance with Magos Lyriax. The entity's emotional state was unstable, fluctuating between humor and genuine despair. That suggested a psychological vulnerability they could exploit. "If you wish for death," she said carefully, "the Imperium has methods, weapons that unmake existence itself, blanks that sever souls from the warp, technologies that reduce matter to component atoms. We could end your suffering." Deadpool laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Oh, honey, no, you couldn't. You're like the 15th group of people to offer me that deal. Give us what we want and we'll kill you. But here's the thing, I'm cursed. Literally. There's this cosmic entity called death, and my ex-boyfriend Thanos got jealous because she liked me, so he made it so I can never die. Ever. I've been atomized, erased from existence, thrown into the sun, and I still came back. Because that's my life, or unlife, or whatever this is." "Thanos," Severine wrote down. "Another Xenos? No, he's you-know-what. Explaining the Marvel Universe would take too long, and I don't think you'd believe me anyway. Let's just say I'm stuck being alive and there's nothing anyone can do about it. Which brings me to my question, why am I chained up in your murder basement when I haven't actually done anything wrong?" "You destroyed a cathedral," Severine stated flatly. "I fell through a cathedral. Gravity destroyed it. Blame physics, not me." You caused mass panic among the faithful. I came back from the dead. That's on them for being surprised. If you'd explained that killing people might not work, we could have avoided the whole thing. You speak heresy against the God Emperor. Deadpool paused. Okay, that one's fair. But in my defense, I didn't know corpse worship was like your whole thing. Where I come from, we usually bury dead people instead of building a religion around them. Call me crazy. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Severine's human eye narrowed, while her augmetic one brightened with barely contained fury. You will not speak of the Emperor in such terms, she said, her voice cold enough to freeze Prometheum. He is the master of mankind, the light in the darkness. He has guided humanity for 10,000 years from his throne on Terra. He is all that stands between us and annihilation. Okay, I get it. He's important. My bad. But real talk. Deadpool leaned forward as far as his chains would allow. If he's so powerful, why does everything here suck so much? I've been here like 6 hours and I've seen enough suffering to last me a lifetime. Which, fun fact, is infinite in my case. So that's saying something. Before Severine could respond, the chamber's voxcaster crackled to life. Commander Thrace's voice emerged, tight with barely controlled panic. Inquisitor, we have a situation. The lower hive is in uproar. Reports are coming in from multiple sectors. Workers are refusing to return to their stations. They're laughing. Severine felt ice in her augmented spine. Laughing? Yes, Inquisitor. They're gathering in groups, sharing jokes, celebrating. Productivity has dropped 40% across all manufactorums. The overseers are reporting complete breakdown of discipline. It started in Sector 7-7 Beta and spread from there. Severine turned slowly to face Deadpool, who had somehow managed to look guilty despite the mask. What did you do? She asked quietly, the tone more dangerous than any shout. I didn't do anything. I just talked to some people, asked them questions, made a few jokes. How was I supposed to know that would cause a revolution? This is not a revolution, Severine corrected. This is heresy. You have infected the population with your madness, with your refusal to accept the natural order. And now they question their purpose, their duty, their place in the Emperor's design. Good, Deadpool said, surprising even himself with the vehemence. Maybe they should question it. Have you seen how they live? They're basically slaves making weapons for an empire that doesn't care if they live or die. That's not noble. That's not purpose. That's just really depressing slavery with extra steps. Magos Lyriax's mechadendrites clicked together in agitation. The entity does not understand. The Imperium requires sacrifice. 10,000 worlds, quadrillions of souls, all working in concert to preserve humanity against threats beyond comprehension. Individual happiness is irrelevant. Only survival matters. But they're not surviving, Deadpool countered. They're just not dying fast enough. There's a difference. The debate was interrupted by another Vox transmission, this one carrying the voice of someone very different. It was smooth, cultured, almost amused. Inquisitor cult. How fascinating to hear you debate philosophy with a creature of chaos. Severine's blood ran cold. She recognized that voice, had heard it once before during the heresy of Saint Alyssa's rest. A voice that had whispered from the mouths of the corrupted before they died. Daemon, she stated, her hand moving to her bolt pistol. Oh, not a daemon, the voice purred. Not yet, but close, so very close. I am merely an observer, watching with great interest as this delightful anomaly spreads its charming infection across your precious Imperium. Deadpool looked around the interrogation chamber, confused. Okay, whose voice is that? Because it's giving me serious final bosses vibes and I'm not ready for a boss fight. I haven't even found all the collectibles yet. The entity is not corrupted by the warp, Lyriax reported, his scanners working overtime. This is a separate phenomenon, a voice transmitted through technological means, origin unknown. I am Slanesh, the voice continued, each word dripping with something that hurt to hear. The dark prince of pleasure, lord of excess, And I have been watching you, little red jester. You are fascinating. A being who cannot die, yet wishes for nothing but oblivion. A creature of chaos who brings laughter instead of pain. You would make an exquisite champion. Hard pass, Deadpool said immediately. I've had enough of cosmic entities trying to recruit me. Thanos tried. Mephisto tried. Once, a sentient cosmic cube tried. It's always the same pitch, join us and we'll give you power. And it's always a scam. No offense. None taken, Slaanesh replied, sounding delighted. But I offer something different. I offer you purpose, entertainment, the chance to spread joy and madness across a galaxy that has forgotten both. These mortals are so desperate for meaning, for anything beyond their grim suffering. You could give them that. Through me. Severine was already moving, ordering tech priests to trace the signal, seal the chamber, activate psi dampeners. But she knew it was too late. The Dark Prince had noticed this entity, had taken interest. And when Slaanesh took interest, corruption followed. Entity, she commanded, her voice sharp. If you have any loyalty to humanity, any shred of decency, you will reject this temptation. Chaos corrupts all it touches, turns joy to madness, laughter to screaming, beauty to horror. Deadpool was quiet for a moment, actually quiet. When he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. You know what's funny? I've been to a lot of universes, met a lot of cosmic horrors, and you know what I learned? They're all the same. They promise freedom but deliver slavery. They promise power but take your soul. They promise everything and give you nothing but regret. He looked toward where the voice seemed to be coming from. So thanks, but no thanks, tentacle face. I work alone. Always have. Always will. The silence that followed was profound. Then Slaanesh laughed, a sound like crystal shattering in reverse. Remarkable. You refuse me. Refuse certainty of purpose. Refuse the only being in this universe who truly understands you. A pause. Very well. I can wait. You will come to me eventually. They always do. When the loneliness becomes too much. When the endless existence wears away your resistance. When you finally realize that meaning must be created, not found. I will be waiting. The presence withdrew. Severine felt it leave like a weight lifting from her shoulders. The Vox casters returned to normal function. The chamber's temperature stabilized. But the damage was done. Deadpool had been noticed by chaos, offered a place among the dark gods, and he had refused. In 10,000 years of inquisitorial records, Severine could think of perhaps 3 individuals who had been directly approached by a chaos god and rejected them. All 3 had been saints, elevated by the Emperor himself for their purity and faith. This creature was no saint. Why? She asked, genuinely curious. You have no faith in the Emperor, no loyalty to the Imperium, no reason to refuse such power. So why? Deadpool shrugged, chains rattling. Because I've been someone's weapon before, someone's tool, someone's pet project, and I'm done with that. If I'm going to be stuck in this universe making terrible jokes and refusing to die, I'm going to do it on my own terms. Not yours, not theirs, mine. For a long moment, Severine studied the entity, trying to understand what she was dealing with. Not a daemon, not a heretic, not a savior, just something else. Something that didn't fit any of the categories the Imperium had spent 10 millennia perfecting. Magos, she said finally. Release him. Lyriax's optical units focused on her with what might have been surprise. Inquisitor? Are you certain? No. But keeping him imprisoned serves no purpose. He cannot be killed, cannot be corrupted, apparently. And his presence causes more disruption contained than free. Better to observe his behavior, learn his patterns, understand what threat he truly represents. The chains released with a hiss of hydraulics. Deadpool stood, rubbing his wrists even though the restraints hadn't actually hurt him. Wow, that's actually reasonable. I was expecting like 30 more hours of interrogation followed by being thrown into a volcano. This is a nice surprise. You will be watched, Severine stated. Every moment, Every action, any deviation from acceptable behavior will result in immediate containment. You may not be killable, but you can be imprisoned, indefinitely, in conditions that would make death preferable. Yeah, I've heard that before too. It's never as bad as people say. Although there was this one time in a Thai prison. He stopped. Actually, I probably shouldn't tell that story. It's not appropriate for mixed company. As Deadpool was escorted from the chamber by a full squad of Tempestus scions, Severine remained behind, reviewing her notes. The entity had been approached by Slanesh directly, had refused. That suggested either incredible willpower or complete ignorance of what he had rejected. Both possibilities were concerning. Magos, she said quietly. Begin deep analysis of the affected sectors. I want to know exactly how his presence influences human behavior, the mechanisms, the vectors, the methods of containment. The population refers to him as the Red Fool, Lyriax reported. Already he is becoming mythology. Stories spread faster than we can suppress them, of a being who cannot die, who laughs at authority, who offers freedom through chaos. Then we must control the narrative, Severine decided. If we cannot stop him, we will shape how others perceive him, make him a cautionary tale, a warning against heresy, rather than an inspiration. But even as she spoke, she knew it was too late. The workers in the lower hive had tasted something dangerous. Not freedom. The Imperium was too strong for that. But the idea of freedom. The concept that their suffering might not be necessary. That their lives might have value beyond productivity. It was the most dangerous heresy of all. In the manufactorums, in the hab blocks, in the dark corners where workers gathered during their brief rest periods, they spoke in whispers about the Red Fool who had died and returned, who had looked at their misery and called it wrong, who had faced the Inquisition and walked free, and slowly, quietly, inevitably, they began to hope. Which was exactly what the Imperium could not tolerate. The Administratum had existed for 10,000 years on a foundation of absolute certainty. Every number recorded, every resource allocated, every life measured in productivity, quotas, and death benefits. The bureaucratic machine that kept the Imperium functioning operated on the principle that humanity was a calculable resource, predictable and manageable. Deadpool had been free for 48 hours. In that time, productivity on Hive Carador had dropped 63%. The Administratum's carefully maintained records were beginning to show anomalies that made no mathematical sense. Senior Administratum Adept Cornelius Voke sat in his scriptorium chamber, surrounded by data slates that refused to reconcile. His augmetic fingers clicked across the keys with increasing agitation, trying to find the calculation error that would explain everything. There had to be an error. Mathematics didn't lie. Numbers were truth incarnate. Impossible, he muttered, his voice thin from decades of breathing recycled air. The projections show negative suffering index. That cannot be. Suffering is a constant. It is the foundation of all imperial economic models. His junior scribe, a young woman named Petria who had memorized 12,000 pages of tax code before her 16th birthday, leaned over his shoulder. Senior Adept, the reports from Manufactorum 77 Beta show workers completing their quotas in half the standard time. Then they stop. They simply stop working and engage in non-productive behavior. What behavior? Voke demanded, his organic eye twitching with stress. They talk, Senior Adept. They tell stories. They laugh. Sector supervisors report complete breakdown of standard operational depression. The workers appear to be happy. Voke's stylus snapped in his augmetic hand. Happy workers were inefficient workers. Happiness suggested hope. Hope suggested the belief that conditions might improve, and if workers believed improvement was possible, they stopped accepting their assigned suffering as inevitable. The entire economic model of the Hive was predicated on despair. Where is the entity now? Voke asked, pulling up security feeds with shaking hands. Multiple locations, Petria reported. He appears in Worker District 9, shares what he calls jokes with the exhausted laborers, appears in Hab Block 73, and questions why the recycled corpse starch rations taste like sadness and broken dreams. Appears in the Temple District, and asks the priests if they've considered that maybe their god is having a really long nap instead of watching over them. He moves between sectors faster than transport systems allow, Voke noted, his fingers flying across calculations. Teleportation, warp-based translocation, unknown, senior adept. Tech priests theorize he simply moves very quickly and people's perception cannot track him accurately, or he exists in multiple places simultaneously, or reality itself is bending to accommodate his impossibility. Voke felt something he had not experienced in 40 years of bureaucratic service, complete inability to categorize a problem. Every issue had a form, every crisis had a procedure, but there was no procedure for an entity that existed outside the carefully maintained order of imperial society. "Get me Inquisitor Cult," he commanded. "This is beyond administratum jurisdiction." 3 districts away, in the lower hive's Worker District 9, Deadpool sat on a stack of cargo containers, surrounded by approximately 200 workers who should have been at their stations. They sat in loose groups, their mandatory rest period having ended 17 minutes ago. None had returned to work. "So this guy," Deadpool was saying, his hands gesturing animatedly, walks into a bar with a parrot on his shoulder. Bartender says, "Where'd you get that?" And the parrot says, "The pet store. They've got thousands of them." Silence. The workers stared at him with expressions ranging from confusion to fascination. Then, slowly, one person started to laugh. Not the harsh, bitter laughter of the condemned, but something lighter, something genuine. It spread. Within seconds, 200 people were laughing. Some didn't even understand the joke. They were laughing because others were laughing. Because the act itself felt rebellious and strange and wonderful. Yara sat at the front of the crowd, her face transformed by an expression she hadn't worn in 14 years. Joy looked alien on her features, like a language she had forgotten how to speak but somehow still understood. "I don't understand," she said when the laughter faded. "The parrot is the one who speaks, not the man?" "That's the twist," Deadpool explained. "See, the bartender assumes the guy is the weird thing, but actually the parrot is the smart one who went to the pet store. It's subverting expectations, like how you all expect me to die when you shoot me. But surprise, still here. Tell us another," someone called from the back. A man named Jorik, who had worked the smelting lines for 30 years. His lungs were scarred from chemical exposure. He would be dead within 5 years. But for this moment, he wanted to hear another story. Okay. But first, serious question." Deadpool looked around at the assembled workers. "Why do you all just accept this? The terrible conditions, the toxic air, the fact that you're basically working yourselves to death for an empire that sees you as replaceable parts." The laughter died. The question hung in the air like smoke. "Because there is no alternative," Yara said finally, her voice quiet. "This is the Imperium. This is how life is, for everyone, forever. But what if it wasn't?" Deadpool leaned forward, his tone unusually serious. "What if you could demand better conditions, better pay, time off that's actually time off? What if you said, 'No, we're not going to work until things improve'?" "That is heresy," an older woman said, her voice trembling. "To question the Imperium is to question the Emperor's design. We are born to serve, to suffer. Our pain is prayer. Our work is worship." "That's the most depressing thing I've ever heard," Deadpool stated flatly. "And I once listened to a 3-hour lecture on existential nihilism by Nietzsche, who was dead at the time. Long story. The overseers will come," Jorik warned. "They always come when productivity drops. There will be punishments, floggings, reduced rations. They will make examples." "Then don't let them," Deadpool suggested. "You outnumber them like 1,000 to 1. What are they going to do if you all just say, 'No,' at the same time?" They will call the Arbites, Yara said. The law enforcement. They have weapons that can kill hundreds in seconds. Crowd control measures that… Yeah. Authoritarian crackdown, I get it. But here's the thing. Deadpool stood, addressing the crowd with theatrical flair. You're all going to die anyway. That's what you keep telling me. Life is suffering. Death is release. Everything is terrible forever. So if you're going to die, why not die trying to make things less terrible? Why not go down fighting for something instead of just slowly poisoning yourselves, making weapons for someone else's war? The crowd was silent, processing words that violated every principle they had been taught since birth. The Imperium endured because its citizens accepted suffering as inevitable, questioned nothing, obeyed everything. It was the only way to manage quadrillions of souls across 1,000,000 worlds. But Deadpool had introduced something dangerous. Not rebellion that was too organized, too purposeful. He had introduced the idea that suffering might be questioned, that maybe, possibly, things didn't have to be this way. It was a seed, tiny, fragile. But seeds had a way of growing in the darkest soil. I will think on your words, Yara said, finally, standing. But now I must return to my station, before the overseers come. The crowd began to disperse, workers filtering back to their posts. Slowly, reluctantly, but still moving, still obeying. 10,000 years of conditioning couldn't be undone by 48 hours of jokes and questions. But it could be scratched, and scratches, if left untended, could spread. Deadpool watched them go, feeling something uncomfortable in his chest. Guilt, maybe. Or responsibility. He had come to this universe by accident, brought chaos by nature, and now people were listening to him. People who would face consequences for his words. This is why I work alone, he muttered. Get close to people. They start hoping. Hope gets them killed, every damn time. An interesting philosophy, a voice said behind him. Female, confident, carrying an accent that suggested high-level education. Deadpool turned to find Inquisitor Severine Kalt standing 20 feet away, flanked by her ever-present gun servitors. She had approached silently, observing his interaction with the workers. Oh, good. It's the murder cop, Deadpool said. Here to arrest me for the crime of telling jokes? Because I gotta warn you, my lawyer's really good. He once got me acquitted of 12 counts of breaking the fourth wall. I am here to understand, Severine stated, moving closer. You refuse power when offered by chaos. You refuse to harm anyone despite ample provocation. You spread disorder not through violence but through questions. What is your purpose? I don't have one, Deadpool admitted. That's kind of my whole thing. I'm not trying to overthrow your empire or corrupt your people or start a revolution. I'm just stuck here, bored, and wondering why everyone is so miserable all the time. Because existence is suffering, Severine replied, as if stating an obvious fact. This is the truth of the universe. The Imperium does not promise happiness. It promises survival. In a galaxy where daemons pour from the warp, where alien species seek to exterminate humanity, where betrayal and corruption lurk in every shadow, happiness is a luxury we cannot afford. But you could, Deadpool countered. You could afford it. You have 1,000,000 worlds, right? Quadrillions of people? That's an insane amount of resources. You could make life better for everyone if you wanted to. But you don't. Because the suffering is the point. The cruelty is the system working as intended. Severine was quiet for a long moment. Her augmetic eye whirred as it focused on Deadpool's mask, as if trying to see through to the face beneath. You are not wrong, she said finally, the admission clearly costing her something. The Imperium is cruel. It is designed to be cruel. Because cruelty is efficient. Fear is efficient. Suffering keeps the masses compliant, productive, and too exhausted to rebel. It is not kind, but it has kept humanity alive for 10,000 years. Can you say your way would do better? I mean, it couldn't do worse. Deadpool gestured around. Look at this place. People working themselves to death in toxic environments for rations that barely keep them alive. No art. No music. no joy. You're not keeping humanity alive. You're just keeping it not dead. There's a difference." "There is no difference," Severine stated coldly. "Not dead is all that matters, in a universe designed to kill us." "But what if—" Deadpool started. "There is no what if," Severine interrupted. "There is only what is. The Imperium, the Emperor, the endless war against annihilation. These are facts, unchangeable, eternal. Your presence here changes nothing." "Doesn't it, though?" Deadpool pointed back toward the manufactorum where the workers were returning. Those people were laughing. For the first time in who knows how long, they felt something other than despair. That's change. Small change, maybe, but change. Change that will be crushed, Severine said with certainty. When you leave, when you die, when you inevitably grow bored and move on, the Imperium will still be here. We will still endure. And those workers will remember their brief moment of hope and realize it meant nothing. "You're probably right," Deadpool admitted. "Usually are, people like you. But here's the thing, I'm not going anywhere. Can't die. Remember? And I'm really, really good at being annoying. So maybe I stick around, keep asking questions, keep making people laugh, keep being a tiny little thorn in your massive, terrifying empire's side." "To what end?" Severine demanded, genuine frustration entering her voice. "What do you hope to accomplish? You cannot overthrow the Imperium. You cannot change 10,000 years of established order. You are one being in a galaxy of quadrillions. You are nothing." Deadpool tilted his head, considering. "You know what I learned in my very long, very annoying life. Nothing is nothing. Every action matters. Even the tiny ones. Every choice ripples outward. Every laugh, every question, every tiny act of rebellion against the way things are. It all adds up. Maybe not today, maybe not for centuries, but it adds up." "Chaos speaks through you," Severine said, her hand moving to her bolt pistol. "Whether you know it or not. Disorder, questioning, the breakdown of necessary hierarchy. This is how corruption begins. With small doubts that grow into heresy. Or maybe," Deadpool suggested, "this is how change begins. With people realizing they deserve better. That suffering isn't noble. That maybe, just maybe, the system is wrong and needs to be fixed." They stood facing each other, the Inquisitor and the Immortal, representing two fundamentally incompatible views of existence. Order versus chaos. Certainty versus question. The way things are versus the way things could be. "I could imprison you," Severine said quietly. "Not kill you. Prison. Sealed in a cell 10 miles beneath the surface. No light, no sound, no contact with anything. For centuries. For millennia. Until you go mad from the isolation." "You could try," Deadpool agreed. "Probably wouldn't work. I've gone mad like 12 times already. Keep bouncing back. It's annoying. Then what stops me from trying?" "Curiosity," Deadpool said simply. "You want to see what happens. You're an Inquisitor. Your whole job is investigating the unknown. And I'm the most unknown thing you've ever found. So, you're going to watch me. Study me. Try to understand what I am and what threat I represent. And while you're doing that, I'm going to keep doing my thing, which is being the most annoying person in whatever room I'm in." Severine felt something rare in her chest. Respect. She despised this entity. It represented everything the Inquisition existed to destroy. But it was honest about its nature. Didn't pretend to nobility. Didn't claim righteousness. It simply existed and refused to apologize for existing. "You will be watched," she said finally. "Every moment. And when you inevitably cross a line that cannot be uncrossed, when your presence becomes a genuine threat rather than a mere irritation, I will personally ensure your imprisonment, not death. Something worse. Are we understood?" "Crystal clear, boss lady. Watch and wait. Tale as old as time." Severine turned to leave, then paused. "Those workers you spoke to, they will be monitored. If any show signs of genuine rebellion, they will be dealt with, harshly." Their blood will be on your hands. Joke's on you, Deadpool called after her. My hands are already covered in blood. Metaphorically. Sometimes literally. The stains never really come out. When the Inquisitor was gone, Deadpool sat back down on his cargo containers. Alone again. As he always was. As he always would be. He thought about the workers. About Yara's smile. About the sound of genuine laughter in a place designed to crush all joy. About the tiny seed he had planted without meaning to. I'm going to regret this, he told the empty air. I always regret this. But hey, what's one more regret on the pile? Above the hive, in orbit, an Imperial Navy frigate translated from the warp. It carried a message from Terra. From the High Lords themselves, a message that would change everything. Because word had reached the Imperium's heart. Word of an entity that could not be killed. That spoke heresy and lived. That had been approached by chaos and refused, and the High Lords, in their eternal wisdom, had made a decision. Deadpool was to be recruited, or destroyed trying. In the Manufactorum, Yara returned to her station and picked up her tools. But something was different. Her hands moved with the same mechanical precision, but her mind was elsewhere, thinking, questioning, wondering. The seed had been planted, and in the grim darkness of the far future, even the smallest seed could grow into something dangerous. The frigate descended through Carador's polluted atmosphere like a falling cathedral. Its hull bore the Aquila of the Imperial Navy and scars from a dozen campaigns. On its bridge, Captain Artemis Vane watched the hive cities grow larger through the view screen, her scarred hands gripping the command throne's armrests. "Vox the planetary governor," she commanded. "Inform him that we are here on direct orders from the High Lords. The entity designated Crimson Zero is to be remanded to our custody immediately." Her second officer, Lieutenant Cross, hesitated. "Captain, the Inquisition has claimed jurisdiction. Inquisitor Cult will not relinquish the entity without—" "The Inquisition," Vane interrupted, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "answers to the same masters we do, and those masters have decided this entity is too valuable to waste on interrogation. We have new orders, new purpose for the thing that will not die." She pulled up a data slate, reading orders that had been sealed with authentication codes that dated back to the Horus Heresy. Orders that could only be issued by the master of the Administratum himself. "The entity is to be weaponized," she read aloud. "Deployed to conflicts where victory is impossible through conventional means. It cannot die, therefore it cannot fail through death. It will fight until the enemy is destroyed or withdraws. It is the perfect soldier for the wars we cannot win." Cross felt cold despite the bridge's maintained temperature. "Captain, the reports say it refuses to follow orders, that it speaks heresy and corrupts those around it with dangerous ideas." "Then we will ensure it has no one to corrupt," Vane replied. "Drop it into war zones alone. Let it fight in isolation. Extract it when the battle is won. Repeat. The entity claims to be bored. We will give it all the excitement it can handle." The frigate settled into orbit, its presence immediately causing a flurry of communications across the hive. Inquisitor Cult received the transmission with hands that wanted to shake, but refused through sheer discipline. "They cannot be serious," she said, reading the orders that had been transmitted directly to her personal Vox. "They want to use it as a weapon?" Magos Lyriax tilted his hooded head. "Logically sound. An unkillable soldier deployed to conflicts with high mortality rates. It could theoretically turn the tide of battles that would otherwise result in complete unit annihilation." "You're assuming it will cooperate," Severine said, already moving toward the landing platforms. "The entity has shown no interest in following orders, no loyalty to the Imperium, no desire to fight our wars." "No dis. Then, they will make it desire," Lyriax stated simply. "The High Lords do not make requests. They make demands. And demands are backed by consequences." "What consequences can you threaten an immortal with?" Severine asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. In Worker District 9, Deadpool was attempting to teach a group of children a game called Duck, Duck, Goose. It was not going well. The children, all born into hive life, had no concept of play. They stared at him with wide eyes, trying to understand what purpose this activity served. Okay, so you sit in a circle, Deadpool explained for the 5th time. And one person walks around, tapping heads, saying, duck, 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 and then says, goose. And you know what? This made more sense when I was 7. Let's try something else. One child, a girl named Mara who couldn't have been more than 9, raised a timid hand. Why do we tap heads? Because it's fun, Deadpool said, as if this explained everything. What is fun? Mara asked, genuinely confused. Deadpool felt something break inside his chest. A child asking what fun was. He had seen a lot of depressing things across multiple universes, but this might have been the worst. Fun is, he started, then stopped. How do you explain fun to someone who had never experienced it? Fun is when you do something and it makes you feel good. Not because you have to, not because someone told you to, just because doing it makes you happy. The children looked at each other, trying to process this concept. Happiness without purpose, action without productivity. It violated everything they had been taught. That sounds like heresy, a boy named Talos said nervously, glancing around as if overseers might appear. Kid, breathing is probably heresy in this place, Deadpool replied. But here's a secret. He leaned in conspiratorially. Sometimes the rules are wrong. Sometimes the people in charge don't know what's best. Sometimes you gotta break the rules to stay human. The Red Fool speaks truth, a voice said from behind him, not hostile, almost amused. Deadpool turned to find an old man standing there. Ancient, really. His face was a map of wrinkles, his eyes clouded with cataracts, his body bent with age and labor. But something about him suggested he had seen things, remembered things from before. I am Cato, the old man said, sitting down with the careful movements of someone whose bones hurt constantly. I have worked the manufactorums for 87 years. I remember when things were different, slightly different. Not better, perhaps, but different. 87 years? Deadpool whistled. That's like ancient for this place. How are you still alive? Spite, Cato replied simply, and the desire to see if anything ever changes. It rarely does. But you, he pointed at Deadpool with a trembling finger. You are change. Unwelcome change. Dangerous change. But change nonetheless. I'm not trying to change anything, Deadpool protested. I'm just stuck here making the best of a really depressing situation. Intent matters less than effect, Cato said, his clouded eyes somehow seeming to see through Deadpool's mask. You have reminded people that laughter exists, that questions can be asked, that authority can be challenged. Even if you leave tomorrow, that memory will remain. Fading, perhaps, but there. Great. So I'm accidentally starting a revolution. That's just perfect. Last time I accidentally started a revolution, it ended with a civil war and me getting blown up. Twice. Not a revolution, Cato corrected. Revolutions are organized, purposeful. This is something smaller. Seeds planted in the dark. Most will die, but some might grow. In 100 years, 1,000, who can say? Super inspiring, old man. Really making me feel good about corrupting children and spreading dangerous ideas. Before Cato could respond, the sky split open. Not with a warp breach, not with an explosion, just the sudden appearance of a massive dropship descending from orbit, its engines creating hurricanes of displaced air. The children scattered, running for cover with the instinct of prey animals. Cato remained seated, watching with mild interest. And here comes the Imperium, he said conversationally, to collect its new weapon. Deadpool looked up at the descending ship, its hull bristling with weapons and authority. Oh, this is going to be one of those, you work for us now conversations, isn't it? Most likely, Cato agreed. You have 2 choices. Comply and be used. Resist and be imprisoned. Either way, your freedom ends here. You know what? I'm getting really tired of people telling me what I can't do. It's been like 3 days, and already everyone's trying to control me. Does this universe have any concept of free will? Free will is heresy, Cato replied, quoting imperial doctrine with a tone that suggested he didn't quite believe it anymore. We are born to serve, to die, to be used in ways that benefit the species. Individual desire is meaningless against the needs of quadrillions. Yeah, I'm definitely not doing that, Deadpool decided, standing up. Time for Plan B. What is Plan B? Cato asked, genuinely curious. I have no idea. That's what makes it Plan B. The dropship landed in the central plaza, crushing a statue of some long-dead imperial hero beneath its weight. The ramp descended, and Captain Vane emerged, flanked by 2 full squads of armed Navy security. Her uniform was immaculate, her bearing military perfection, her expression suggesting she had dealt with difficult assets before. Entity designated Crimson Zero, she announced, her voice amplified by voxcasters. You are hereby conscripted into Imperial service under emergency protocols established by the High Lords of Terra. You will report to my ship immediately for briefing and deployment. Deadpool looked at her, looked at the soldiers, looked at the ship, then looked back at Cato. They can't actually make me do this, right? I mean, what are they going to do if I say no? Find out, Cato suggested with a slight smile. Deadpool turned to face Captain Vane. Yeah, so, I appreciate the offer, but I'm going to have to decline. Nothing personal. I'm just not really a serve the Empire kind of guy. More of a freelance chaos agent with commitment issues. Vane's expression didn't change. You misunderstand. This is not an offer. This is an order. Refusal constitutes treason. Treason is punishable by death. Tried that already. Didn't take. Maybe work on your threats? Not your death, Vane clarified, her voice cold. Theirs. She gestured, and the soldiers' weapons turned away from Deadpool, toward the workers who had gathered to watch, toward the children who hadn't run far enough, toward Cato, who sat calmly in the plaza, as if he had expected this. For every hour you refuse service, Vane continued, we execute 100 workers, randomly selected. No appeals, no mercy. You have 10 seconds to comply. Deadpool felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Genuine, cold rage. Not the fun kind he felt during fights. Not the theatrical anger he performed for effect. Real fury at the casual cruelty. At the willingness to murder innocents, to coerce obedience. You're bluffing, he said, though he knew she wasn't. 10. Vane began counting. 9. 8. The soldiers' weapons hummed, charging. Targeting systems locked onto random workers. A woman holding a child. A man too exhausted to run. Yara, standing near the edge of the crowd, her face showing acceptance of whatever came next. 7. 6. 5. Okay, Deadpool shouted, raising his hands. You win. I'll go. I'll be your murder weapon. Just don't shoot them. 4. 3. 2. Vane paused. Compliance accepted. Workers, return to your stations. This incident will be reported as resolved with 0 casualties. The weapons powered down. The workers dispersed, herded by security forces back toward the manufactorums. Within minutes, the plaza was empty, except for Deadpool, Vane, her soldiers, and Cato, who still hadn't moved. That was disgusting, Deadpool said quietly, his usual humor completely absent. Even for a fascist nightmare empire, that was a new low. It was efficient, Vane replied without emotion. You possess a weakness, concern for others. We will exploit that weakness to ensure compliance. This is how the Imperium has endured for 10,000 years. By understanding that everyone has something they fear to lose. I'm going to remember this, Deadpool warned, his voice carrying a tone he rarely used. The one that suggested genuine danger. And someday, when you least expect it, when you think everything is under control, I'm going to pay you back for this. With interest. Noted, Vane said, completely unbothered. Now board the ship. Your first deployment begins in 6 hours. Deadpool walked toward the ramp, each step heavy with suppressed violence. As he passed Cato, the old man spoke quietly. "The seed grows faster when watered with blood," he said. "Remember that, Red Fool. When they force you to be their weapon, you are also teaching everyone watching what the Imperium truly is. Not noble, not protective, just cruel and desperate." Deadpool paused. "That's not exactly comforting, old man." "Truth rarely is," Cato replied. "But it is still truth." On the ship, Deadpool was processed with bureaucratic efficiency. His weapons were returned after all. They wanted him to fight. His mask was analyzed and logged. His biological impossibility was noted in 17 different reports. He was taken to a briefing room where Captain Vane displayed a holo map of a war zone, a planet called Vortan 3, where an orc Wa had overwhelmed Imperial defenses. 3 million soldiers dead. Entire cities reduced to rubble. The orcs were winning through sheer brutal momentum. "Your mission is simple," Vane explained. "You will be dropped into the heaviest concentration of enemy forces. You will fight until they retreat or are destroyed. You will not be extracted until victory is achieved. Food and ammunition will be supplied via drop pod. Everything else is your problem." "Let me guess," Deadpool said, strapped into a deployment harness. "If I try to leave, you execute more workers?" "Correct. We will maintain monitoring. Any deviation from mission parameters results in consequences for Hive Carador's population. Are we understood?" "Crystal clear. You're monsters, using fear to turn me into a weapon." "Got it." "We are survivors," Vane corrected, "in a galaxy designed to kill us. Morality is a luxury for species that are not constantly at war with everything that exists. We do what we must." The ship's hull opened. Beyond it, Deadpool could see the scarred surface of Vortan 3, smoke rising from 1,000 fires, the distant sound of explosions even through the void. A world being torn apart by violence. "One more thing," Vane added as Deadpool was loaded into the drop pod. "The orcs worship their gods through violence, through fighting and killing and dying. You're going to fit right in." "Yeah, well, at least the orcs are honest about being violent monsters. You guys pretend you're the good guys." "There are no good guys," Vane replied. "Only survivors and the dead. Now drop." The pod launched. Deadpool felt the familiar sensation of gravity crushing his body, atmosphere screaming past the hull, the world rushing up to meet him. He had done this before. Orbital insertions, drop zone deployments, suicide missions disguised as tactics, but never for an empire he hated. Never with hostages held against his cooperation, never feeling quite this level of anger at the people who had sent him. The pod hit ground in the middle of an orc encampment. Thousands of the massive green-skinned aliens, all muscle and violence and joy at the prospect of fighting. They turned toward the impact crater with weapons raised, and something like happiness in their bestial eyes. Deadpool kicked open the pod door and stepped out, drawing his katanas. "Okay, boys," he announced to the assembled orcs. "I'm in a really bad mood, and you guys are about to become my therapy session. Who wants to go first?" The orcs roared. Not in fear, in excitement. This was what they lived for: fighting, killing, testing themselves against a worthy opponent. And Deadpool, despite his anger, despite his resentment at being forced into this, felt something familiar stir in his chest. The joy of violence without consequence. The freedom of a fight where death was impossible. The pure, simple pleasure of combat against enemies who genuinely wanted to kill him. Maybe, just maybe, this wouldn't be completely terrible. He charged into the orc horde, blades flashing, laughter returning to his voice. Because if he was going to be a weapon, he was going to be the most annoying weapon the Imperium had ever created. And somewhere on Hive Carador, Cato sat in the empty plaza and smiled. The seed had been watered with blood. The workers had seen the Imperium's true face. The Red Fool had been forced into service, and none of it had gone the way the Imperium intended. Because you can't control chaos. You can only watch it spread. The war on Vortan III had been raging for 6 months. Imperial Guard regiments had thrown themselves against the Orc horde with the desperate courage of men who knew retreat meant execution. They had died by the millions. Tanks reduced to scrap, fortifications overrun, hope abandoned somewhere around the 3rd month when reinforcements stopped coming. Then, Deadpool arrived. The first day, he killed 300 orcs. Not through skill or tactics, but through sheer refusal to stay dead. They would chop him apart. He would regenerate. They would crush him beneath war machines. He would crawl out. They would burn him to ash. He would reform from the ash and keep fighting. The orcs loved him. "Da red git," they roared with something approaching affection. "Da one what don't die. Prop a good scrap." Deadpool, covered in green blood and significantly less of his own, stood atop a pile of orc corpses and realized something disturbing. He was having fun, not pretend fun, not the dark humor he used to cope with misery. Actual, genuine enjoyment of the violence. "This is wrong," he muttered, decapitating another orc with a casual swing. "I should not be enjoying this. These guys are just doing what they're programmed to do, living their best violent lives. And here I am ruining it." "You talk funny," an orc war boss bellowed, charging with a power claw the size of a small car. "But you fight good. That's what counts." "Thanks, I think. Look, can we talk about this? Maybe negotiate some kind of ceasefire? I'm really not supposed to be here," and the power claw closed around Deadpool's torso and squeezed. His body exploded in a shower of red that would have been fatal for literally anyone else. "Okay, rude." Deadpool's voice came from the remains. "We were having a moment." He regenerated, again. The war boss stared with what might have been joy or confusion. Hard to tell with orcs. "You really don't die," the war boss laughed, a sound like rocks in a blender. "Best fight ever." They fought for 3 hours. Deadpool died 17 times. The war boss died once, but that was permanent. When it was over, when the orc's body finally stopped twitching, Deadpool sat down in the mud and blood and tried to figure out what he was becoming. "I'm a weapon now," he said to no one. "The Imperium's unkillable murder machine. And the worst part? I'm good at it. I'm always good at this." Above the battlefield, in Captain Vane's frigate, surveillance confirmed the war boss's death. The orc horde would fragment without leadership. Vortan III could be retaken. Mission accomplished. "Prepare extraction," Vane ordered. "Captain," Lieutenant Cross said hesitantly, "the entity has been fighting for 72 hours without rest. Shouldn't we?" "It doesn't need rest," Vane interrupted. "It regenerates constantly. Fatigue is irrelevant. Leave it deployed. Let it clear the remaining orc concentrations. We can extract when the planet is secured." "Captain, that could take weeks." "Then it takes weeks. The entity's comfort is not a priority. Its function is." On the surface, Deadpool felt the connection, felt the Imperium watching, felt their willingness to use him until there was nothing left to use. Except there would always be something left. Because he couldn't die, couldn't escape through death, couldn't end. "I hate this," he told a dying orc who probably didn't understand Gothic. "I hate being used, hate being a tool, hate that they're right. I am the perfect weapon. Can't be destroyed, can't refuse without getting innocents killed, can't even die to spite them." The orc gurgled something that might have been agreement, or might have been its death rattle. Deadpool stood, looked at the horizon where more orcs were gathering, looked at the sky where the Imperium watched, looked at his hands, covered in blood that wasn't his. "Okay," he said quietly. "If I'm going to be a weapon, I'm going to be the worst weapon they've ever made. Not because I fight badly, but because I'm going to make them regret every single deployment." He started walking toward the next concentration of orcs. But as he walked, he talked, to himself, to the universe, to the monitoring equipment he knew was tracking him. "You know what's funny about weapons? They can turn on their wielders. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday, when you get comfortable, when you think you've got me figured out, when you believe the hostages will keep me compliant forever. That's when I'm going to remind you what chaos really means. In the frigate, Vane listened to the transmission and made a note. Potential rebellion. Expected. Manageable. The entity could threaten all it wanted. As long as Hive Carador's population existed, they had leverage. What she didn't know was that Deadpool was already 3 steps ahead. 4 weeks later, Vorton 3 was declared secured. The Orc presence had been reduced to scattered warbands that posed no strategic threat. Imperial reconstruction teams were already landing, preparing to strip the planet of resources and rebuild the manufactorums. Deadpool was extracted, brought back to the frigate, hosed down with industrial cleaners that barely touched the accumulated filth. Given a new uniform because the old one had been destroyed so many times the matter recyclers couldn't keep up. Debriefing in 1 hour, Vane informed him through the cell's Vox system. Your next deployment is already scheduled. Cool, Deadpool replied, examining his cell. 3 meters by 3 meters, reinforced walls, no windows. A cot that looked less comfortable than sleeping on rocks. So this is my life now. Fight, extract, fight again, forever, living the dream. But while Vane monitored him, while the Imperium prepared his next mission, Deadpool was doing something they hadn't anticipated. He was thinking. The Imperium ran on fear and leverage. They controlled him through hostages, but hostages only worked if he cared about them. And caring required connection. Connection required presence. And presence could be faked if you were smart enough. Computer, he said to the cell's monitoring system. How many hive worlds are there in the Imperium? No response. The Imperium didn't provide information to weapons. Right. Why would you answer? That would be helpful. And we can't have that. But Deadpool had seen the reports during his processing, had glimpsed data slates while being shuffled between departments, had paid attention when everyone assumed his jokes meant he wasn't listening. Thousands of hive worlds, quadrillions of people, all suffering under the same system, all kept compliant through the same methods: fear, poverty, the crushing weight of endless labor. And somewhere in that vast machine, there had to be others like him. Not unkillable, maybe, but thinking, questioning, remembering that life could be different. Like Cato, like Yara, like the workers who had laughed at his jokes. Hey, monitoring system, Deadpool said, looking directly at the surveillance lens. Quick question. How many of me would it take to break the Imperium? Like, if there were 1,000 Deadpools, all unkillable, all refusing to cooperate, all spreading chaos wherever you sent us. How long before the system collapsed? Silence. But somewhere, in the data processing centers, his words were being recorded, analyzed, flagged as potential sedition. I'm betting not long, Deadpool continued, because your empire runs on certainty, on everyone knowing their place, on the assumption that resistance is futile. But I'm proof that's not true. I resist constantly and I'm still here, still talking, still thinking, still refusing to be what you want me to be. The cell door opened. Captain Vane stood there, flanked by armed guards. Her expression was carefully neutral, but something in her eyes suggested concern. You will not spread sedition, she stated. Your words are monitored. Any attempt to encourage rebellion will result in consequences. Yeah. Dead workers, I remember. But here's what I've been thinking during my month of therapeutic murder: you're going to run out of hostages eventually. You can't kill everyone. And the more you kill to control me, the more people realize what the Imperium really is. So you're kind of stuck, aren't you? Vane was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled. It was not a kind expression. You're correct, she admitted. We cannot kill everyone. But we don't need to. We just need to kill enough that others fear the same fate. That is how control works. Not through total destruction, but through selective violence that teaches lessons. That's the most evil thing I've ever heard. And I've met Mephisto. He's literally the devil and he's less creepy than you. Evil, Vane mused. Such a simple word. We are not evil. We are necessary. The Imperium is the only thing keeping humanity from extinction. Our methods are harsh because the alternative is annihilation. Your rebellion, your questions, your chaos, all of it threatens the survival of the species. Or, Deadpool suggested, maybe the Imperium is what threatens the species. Maybe keeping people in misery and poverty and fear is what makes them vulnerable. Maybe if you actually took care of your citizens, they'd be stronger, healthier, more able to fight the actual threats instead of just barely surviving your protection. That is the logic of someone who has never commanded 1,000,000 worlds. Vane replied. That is the idealism of someone who doesn't understand that quadrillions of individuals cannot be managed through kindness, only through structure, through hierarchy, through the systematic suppression of individual desire in favor of collective survival. That's just fascism with extra steps. Call it what you wish. It keeps humanity alive. Can you say your way would do better? Deadpool opened his mouth, closed it, because he didn't have an answer. He didn't know if there was a better way. He just knew this way was wrong. But knowing something was wrong and knowing how to fix it were different things. Your next deployment, Vane continued, is in 12 hours. A world called Sanctum Mortis. Chaos cultists have overrun the primary hive. Your mission is to kill every corrupted citizen, approximately 7 million targets. We expect completion within 1 month. 7 million people, Deadpool repeated slowly. You want me to murder 7 million people. They are no longer people. They are corrupted, lost to chaos. Killing them is mercy. Refusing to kill them is condemning billions more to the same corruption. And if I refuse? Hive Carador loses 100,000 workers, randomly selected, including the children you taught to play, including the old man who spoke to you in the plaza, including everyone who ever listened to your words and dared to hope. Deadpool felt something break inside him, not his spirit that had broken long ago, but some final illusion that this situation could be resolved through cleverness or humor or refusing to participate. You're going to make me a monster, he said quietly. You're going to take someone who just wanted to be left alone and turn him into exactly the kind of weapon I spent years trying not to be. We're not making you anything, Vane replied. We're simply using what you already are. You've killed thousands, perhaps millions across your existence. We're just pointing you at targets that matter to Imperial survival. Those people I killed were usually trying to kill me first. Or they were villains. Or they were clones. Or they came back. It was complicated, but this, he gestured at nothing, at everything. This is just mass murder. With bureaucratic approval. Yes, Vane agreed simply. Welcome to the Imperium, where mass murder is policy and survival is victory. Now prepare for deployment, and pray to whatever gods you believe in that your conscience doesn't slow you down, because every hour you delay, more workers die. She left, the door sealed. Deadpool sat on his cot and stared at the walls. 7 million people. Corrupted by chaos, yes. Lost to madness and mutation, but still people. Still individuals who had once lived and loved and hoped before something terrible transformed them. And he was supposed to kill them all. I can't do this, he whispered. But he knew he would. Because the alternative was watching innocents die for his refusal. Because the Imperium had trapped him in a choice between two horrors. Because he was exactly what they believed, a weapon that could be pointed and fired. 12 hours later, he dropped into Sanctum Mortis. The hive was a nightmare of twisted architecture and screaming citizens whose bodies had been warped by warp exposure. They attacked with claws and mutations and desperate madness. He killed them, all of them. For weeks, he moved through the corrupted hive like a plague, ending everything that moved. Not with joy, not with satisfaction, just mechanical efficiency, born of absolute despair. By the end, when the last corrupted citizen fell and the hive was silent except for his breathing, Deadpool stood in a street piled with bodies and felt nothing. The jokes were gone. The humor had died somewhere around victim number 3,000. Now there was just exhaustion and the knowledge that this would happen again, and again, and again, forever. Because he couldn't die, couldn't escape, couldn't refuse without condemning others to the same fate. The Imperium wins, he said to the empty hive, not through strength, through making you choose between terrible options until you forget there were ever good ones. He was extracted, taken back to his cell, given 6 hours rest before the next mission briefing. The cycle continued. Deployment after deployment, war after war, each one stripping away more of his humanity until he wasn't sure what remained. 3 months, 17 deployments, hundreds of thousands dead by his hands. The Imperium had successfully weaponized him through the simple expedient of making resistance more painful than compliance. But something was happening, something the Imperium hadn't anticipated. On Hive Carador, in the manufactorums and hab blocks, in the dark spaces where workers gathered during their brief rest, they spoke of the Red Fool, the being who had laughed and asked questions and been dragged away to serve as a weapon. They spoke of how the Imperium had needed to threaten innocent lives to ensure his compliance, of how the Empire's methods were so brutal that even an unkillable being had been forced to submit. They spoke, and speaking led to thinking. Thinking led to questioning. Questioning led to something dangerous. Not rebellion. Not yet. But the understanding that their suffering was a choice made by those in power. That the cruelty was intentional. That perhaps, maybe, the Imperium was not protecting them but exploiting them. Cato sat in his corner of the manufactorum and smiled his knowing smile. The seed had grown, not into revolution, but into awareness. And awareness, given time, could grow into anything. On the frigate, Captain Vane reviewed reports and felt satisfied. The entity had been successfully integrated. 17 successful missions, hundreds of thousands of enemies eliminated. Acceptable losses among Imperial forces. The weapon was performing as intended. She didn't see the danger. Didn't recognize that every deployment, every forced atrocity, every dead innocent was teaching Deadpool something important. How the Imperium worked, where its leverage came from, what it feared most. And in his cell, between deployments, Deadpool was planning. Not revenge that was too simple, not escape that was impossible. Something else. Something the Imperium wouldn't see coming because it violated every assumption they had about how weapons behaved. He was going to give them exactly what they wanted, become the perfect weapon, the most efficient killer they had ever deployed. Obedient, compliant, effective. And then, when they trusted him completely, when they believed they had won, when they deployed him somewhere truly important, he was going to stop. Not fight, not refuse orders, just stop. Stand still, become a statue. Let them kill hostages, let them threaten, let them rage, and refuse to move. Refuse to be their weapon anymore regardless of consequences. Because the Imperium ran on fear, on the certainty that sufficient leverage could compel any behavior, on the assumption that everyone would choose survival over principle. But Deadpool had learned something in his infinite lifetime, something the Imperium had forgotten in its 10,000 years of cruel efficiency. Sometimes the only way to win was to refuse to play. And when he finally made that choice, when he finally called their bluff and accepted the consequences, the entire Imperium would have to confront a question it had spent millennia avoiding. What do you do with someone who can't be killed, can't be controlled, and refuses to cooperate? The answer would break something. Maybe him, maybe the Imperium, maybe both. But it would be his choice, his decision, his final act of defiance against a system designed to crush all defiance. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there was only war, where hope had died and cruelty reigned eternal, one immortal being was preparing to do something impossible. He was going to choose death over slavery, even though death would never come. And that choice, when it finally happened, would echo across 1,000,000 worlds. Because in a galaxy that had forgotten what freedom meant, even the smallest act of defiance was revolutionary. Even if it changed nothing. Even if no one remembered. Even if the darkness continued forever. At least it would be his choice. The Red Fool came to the Imperium by accident, was forced to serve through cruelty, became their weapon through impossible choices, and in the end, planned the one act of rebellion. They could never anticipate the refusal to be what they made him. Whether he ever executes that plan, whether it changes anything, whether anyone remembers, that's another story. But in the grim dark future where there is only war, even planning defiance is an act of hope, and hope, however small, is the most dangerous heresy of all.